And of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, viewers, listeners across the region and indeed across the hemisphere. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here at the office of the Leader of the Opposition in Port of Spain, Trinidad, for a press conference hosted at the office of the Leader of the Opposition on critical matters facing Trinidad and Tobago in our social, economic, and political sphere. This morning, I'm extremely elated to be joined by former Senator, former Minister of National Security, former Commissioner of Police, and political leader of the National Transformation Alliance, the very distinguished Gary Griffith, who will speak to us later on issues of crime, security, and so on. But before Mr. Griffith takes the microphone, I will indeed make a presentation on some issues relating to national security, which have come to light in the public domain over the recent past, and particularly yesterday. Yesterday, we had the unfortunate exhibition of the vile and completely inappropriate presentation by the Prime Minister, Keith Rowley, at two events. First, a post-cabinet press conference in which nothing of cabinet was discussed. Nothing of cabinet was released in terms of decisions, policies, and programs, and so on. And then later in the evening, to compound that issue, to add, insult to injury, Dr. Rowley and Minister Hines, I believed, spoke at Sawa Barataria, somewhere there, at a meeting attended by, I believe, about 75 people, mostly state enterprise officials and MPs, councillors mandated to be there. They spoke again in the most vile and inappropriate manner on matters of national security. And at that meeting, not one issue of policy, anti-crime plan, program was discussed, was announced. Absolutely no initiatives discussed at that meeting. However, the political leader of the PNM and the Minister of National Security took it upon themselves to attack officers of the United National Congress, the political leader of the NTA, the leader of the opposition. Quite clearly, their approach is accuse the opposition and excuse the government. That is their policy. Accuse the opposition and excuse the government. While murder is rampant in this society, and some people are actually norming to murder each and every day, the People's National Movement are engaged in mixing and mingling, as they did this week as well. They remain high in the sky, and when you are so high in the sky in your castle, you really are deprived of oxygen, and you may not be able to understand what is happening in this society. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we have reached a stage where a grave digger was robbed at the Tanapuna Cemetery, where the police can be seen offloading potato and packing potato in a police vehicle, because that somehow has their focus, attention, and priority. It is not solving crime, it is not detection, it is not patrolling, etc., etc. Yet the Prime Minister was frothing at the mouth, targeting the opposition last evening. And I will begin my presentation just by quoting from the Trinidad Guardian of today, Friday, January 19th. I have it in my hand here. An editorial entitled, "Cut the Talk, Action Needed Against Crime." I will just read one paragraph from this editorial of today. And it states, at paragraph 4, I believe, I quote, "So if not a state of emergency, then what? Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, what? Everything that you and your loquacious Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines, have done has failed. Please, we have had enough of you and your ministers standing on political platforms and prattling. Surprise the nation. Do and succeed in your efforts in doing so," unquote. Now, that is a daily newspaper. That is not the blog somewhere. That is not a letter to the editor and so on. That is in the editorial of The Guardian of today. The Prime Minister is now guilty of talk. He's guilty of talk and no action. Inaction and distraction are the only actions he knew. And the Prime Minister takes no responsibility. They blame the opposition, they blame the UNC, they blame Mr. Griffith, they blame everyone except themselves for the state that this country has reached. Mr. Griffith will speak to the issue of state of emergency and so on. He will speak to that later in this press conference. All I would say is that when we implemented a state of emergency, it had the effect of reducing crime. It had the effect. But as I said, it's a matter that I think Mr. Griffith is much more prepared to address. They gave no hope to the nation. The Prime Minister gave no hope to this nation last evening. Blood is on the streets. The morgue is full. Cries everywhere from mothers, children, and absolutely nothing from the Prime Minister. The Minister of National Security, can I remind you, he was out of the public domain, he was out of the media for a month or so. I think he took advice to quit while he was behind. So he was away from the media. The last time he was seen was sleeping at Basdev Pandey's funeral. That was the last time we saw him. In fact, he should have given that seat to Karen Teixeira or Timothy Hamilsmith. I think they desperately wanted that seat. He should have given it up because he was sleeping in the funeral. Then he appears last evening after being tranquilized. He appeared on the political platform attacking Mr. Griffith. He says, it is my greatest achievement that I saw his back. I think he has some phobia, with Mr. Griffith. And Mr. Griffith is well capable of dealing with that matter. Because he's making vile reference to underclothes and so on. Matters unbecoming of national leaders, ministers of government. And I want to make this point as I reach here. It wasn't on my list as yet, but in school, we work with principals and teachers on a daily basis to tell our children, our 9-year-old, 10-year, 11-year-old children, not to use certain words in school. So we are there telling our children, don't call another boy a sissy. It's not good. We are telling our children not to bully people. We are telling our children not to be in class and tell a fellow student, shut up. It is not polite. It is not proper. We are working with teachers and principals on a daily basis to tell children not to do that. The children look at the news, may look at a newspaper, but certainly on social media will see a clip and the Prime Minister of this country telling people shut up. The Minister of National Security describing people as sissy. What do you expect for the children? This is why we are in a system today, the education system, where children are beating other children unconscious and sending them to the hospital, speaking in this way. How do I tell my son, 9-year-old son, not to use these terms when he would hear on the social media a Prime Minister, National Security Minister talking that way? And that is a fundamental issue. That is a fundamental issue. All of us in our life, sometimes we may lose it or so on. But Hines and Rowley are now desperate. They are frustrated by their inaction. They are frustrated by their impotence in dealing with crime. And they have now erupted into a vile pattern of conduct, of language, of behavior. And that is something I wanted to signal very early. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I advise Minister Hines that he should really prevent himself from further embarrassment by saying nothing and leaving the position of Minister of National Security. This is a government that cannot distribute a food card in a competent manner and want to deal with murder and crime. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced two initiatives which I will comment on. First, there's an announcement of a $100 million program that will somehow deal with gang violence. There is no issue of whether or not the government will seek international help, whether or not the government will introduce new programs from national security, from the police, will strengthen the gang unit, will get more scientific and technology equipment and devices to deal with murder. But there's $100 million. Now, Dr. Rowley pulls $100 million from a hat. Why 100 and not 99? Why 100 and not 110? He pulls it from a hat because that makes news. I mean, that sounds good, $100 million. Demands Minister of Finance, find that. We are in a country today where police stations don't have water for their washroom and for their face basin to wash their hands. Policemen complain at certain stations they don't have ink. They don't have paper. I can tell you, I said it before, I helped a police station over the last few months to buy a printer. They could not afford a printer. And you are now flinging $100 million. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I want to say, without any doubt of contradiction, that this is a joke. $100 million for who and for what? This program, as Rowley announced, is really some type of security service geriatric program. It is old man and youth man trying to go into communities where young gangsters have AK-47 or automatic, semi-automatic rifles that fire how much rounds a minute. Mr. Griffith can tell us in detail those things. But heavy artillery, and you are sending retirees and youth men, recruits, to go and do what with $100 million? I put it to you, this money is for the gangs. They are going to fund the gangs with $100 million. The gangsters today, members of the press, the gangsters today are salivating at the prospect of $100 million coming our way, while the police are cussing that they don't have water, they don't have basic equipment, they don't have ink, paper, diary, book. They have nothing. Receipt book. $100 million for the gangs that are happy this morning that there will be a program of $100 million for them. And it will be for gangs because the Prime Minister announced no program. We know social development would have $1 million program and so on to deal with poverty areas and underprivileged areas. But the Prime Minister gives no detail on this. Absolutely none. While they are going to put $100 million in the hands of gangsters, do you know the electronic monitoring bracelet for the foot where someone convicted of human trafficking escaped? Because I think he bite it or take it out, it was plastic, inferior material. They have not spent money to buy high quality electronic monitoring bracelets for persons convicted or on bail, etc. They have bought inferior material so that today a poodle dog can bite out the electronic bracelet from your ankle. They will not spend the money on that. They will go into the gang areas with $100 million for who? And these are the questions we asked this morning. This old man, youth man team, what are they going to do with $100 million? Exactly what are they going to do with that? So now, the gangsters may decide now with $100 million, they can work from home. It becomes easier. Money is actually coming to you. You don't have to go out and get it. And you can program using your technology all the criminal initiatives that you would like to. These are serious questions, and the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, as currently constituted, must be made to explain what are they doing with that. Who are you recruiting? Is this to give jobs for P&M boys and girls who retired from the Defense Force? Is this to call back their select persons and give them a little money and call it a program for gang intervention? The Prime Minister also attacked a former police officer of a high rank who spoke at the very successful Monday night anti-crime consultation in St. Joseph. A former superintendent of police, I believe. He attacked him in the most vile manner, telling him to shut up. These are people who have worked their entire life, put their life on the line every single day for this country, to protect this country. Whatever you may think of them, you ought not to be speaking and attacking retired police officers in this manner. You may not agree with him, you may not agree with his point of view, but you ought not to be attacking in that manner. I wanted to remind Keith Rowley, it's not you alone know about policeman. We in the opposition here, we didn't come to town yesterday. We have spent good years in Port of Spain and in office. And you know there are persons you have hired and you have placed in high positions, retired police officers of high rank. And you put them all over the place, including the airport. And there are stories upon stories and files upon files of senior police officers who have questions to answer to this day about drugs disappearing. and prisoners escaping, and pigtail bucket full with money escaping. And they have been the persons who have been appointed by former administrations of the PNM and this current administration. So don't wash your mouth on anybody who come to a meeting of the UNC and raise issues of the management of the TTPS. Look, in the next editorial today, could I point you? Editorial of the Express. Today, Friday, January 19th. Look this, the Express. Questions for top cop. The Express makes a case to question the Commissioner of Police on the management of the fleet of vehicles. Where you have now, all over the place, you have this iron dump heap of police vehicles that cannot be fixed, unwilling to be fixed. There's no system in place to fix it. When Mr. Griffith was there, I recall, there was this program that took all these derelict vehicles. If they had to be scrapped, auction, you can auction them. If not, fix them, get them on the road in record time. Today, the commissioner has to answer questions of buying vehicles that may not be suitable for purpose. These are questions a commissioner must answer. A commissioner of police is not holier than thou, is not beyond reproach. You can ask questions to a commissioner of police. That's what they're there for. So a prime minister ought not to be shutting up a citizen for saying that there's a lack of leadership, management in the TTPS. So, members of the press, this was a critical issue yesterday raised by the prime minister. This $100 million that they will fling towards the defense force, not the police, the defense force, for some initiative that they cannot spell out, that they cannot explain. And I put it to you that nothing will happen with that. Nothing will happen. Just as they pass money to fix road and bridge and cannot fix road and bridge, they will not do anything. They will take that money and siphon it to gangs. And gangs will be collecting money from that program. And while that's happening, ordinary citizens are in fear. Do you know that there are about 7 cabinet ministers, maybe more, who have full security from the state? Police, defense force, special branch. Several of them are not even in positions where their life is under threat. You know, several of them, they are not. They're in ministries that really don't carry as much threat as national security, etc. The ministers and the prime ministers, they have the luxury of security. They don't live in fear like ordinary citizens. Ordinary citizens scared to go to the market, to go to the grocery, to go to the pharmacy, to go to the bank. You know, when you get home, you bolt your door, put on your alarm if you have one, pull down your blinds so nobody could look inside. You listen to your dog if the dog barking too much. You follow me? The whole night you have to watch the neighborhood watch group chat because you want to know if anybody driving in the neighborhood. Ordinary citizens have to live like this. While ministers of government up and down the place with siren and blue light and security at their house and security at other houses they visit, I saw once. So, so some of their friends benefit from extra security because the minister may be a regular visitor to a particular place. This is what operates. So ordinary citizens continue to feel the brunt, brothers and sisters of the press, of the criminal elements. The second and last new issue I will raise today is this issue of constitutional reform. Right. I noticed also in the press, the business community apparently were jolted into action after the leader of the opposition's anti-crime consultation on Monday last. They start making comments about getting the big fish and getting the small fish and what is what and so on. You never hear them before, Never hear them before. Suddenly. And then the typical of some of the elements in the business community, they want to blame the UNC. Everybody says, because they want to appear that they're unbiased and neutral and so on, we have to blame the PNM and the UNC. Well, I think we should issue instructions to the Commissioner of Police to follow certain policy guidelines. Because if the UNC and the opposition can dictate to you can blame us, then we should get the power and responsibility to direct Commissioner of Police and Defense Force. Because that is what the government does. The government must direct, not the opposition. The opposition makes recommendations, critical observations, support in some case. We have supported 41 pieces of legislation to deal with crime. That's the next myth we have that the opposition don't support this or that. 41 pieces of legislation we have supported to deal with crime. On another occasion, somebody will read all. But anyway, constitutional reform. Now, this again is pulled from a hat. Keith Rowley is in the 9th year of his government, on his last legs, in his last few days. He comes now suddenly and decide that we have constitutional reform. Appoint a committee chaired by a former speaker who kick out Basdev Pandey for using a laptop. And today has to chair a committee to look into Mr. Pandey's concern about constitution reform, having kicked him out for using a laptop years ago. There are other members of this committee, and I want to say at the beginning, I have great respect for all members of that committee, including the chairman. I have great respect for their professionalism, for their integrity. But I'm afraid that the government and Keith Rowley is seeking to use them for a political purpose because they are coming to an election. They want to mamagai, they want to fool the population into believing they're doing something about constitutional reform. So they have a committee to get terms of reference and get a position paper. And then next year, June, July, somewhere you consult the population. That takes us to the end of the year. The next year, within the first few months, a general election. You will not even come to parliament with a bill to amend the constitution. You will not even come to parliament with a bill. And if you come to a parliament, look who you find in. Me. You find in the United National Congress. And you cannot come to parliament with a bill in that short time. So this is really an act to mamagai, to fool, to pull wool over the eyes of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. There will be no constitutional reform. You cannot do it in that time frame. And we have other reports. I think there's a Wilson report. Mr. Prakash Ramada, a former Minister of Government, had also compiled with an independent team a report on constitutional reform. And there are many others. Why don't you look at those reports and see what is viable and then possibly discuss it with the political opposition and other groups in the society and so on? Maybe you move forward. But to go now and engage in this process knowing that nothing will happen is a sham. And I believe this is a red herring, just to fool the population, maybe to appease the spirit of Basdev Pandey. I don't know. But the Prime Minister should have spoken about home invasion, murder, burglary, larceny of cars and so on. Spoken about those issues that affect the population, not to try to fool the people with constitution reform, for which you will do nothing and implement nothing. I will wind up in a couple minutes, but to say that we also have in our armory, so to speak, I want to remind the population that it was the People's Partnership Administration in which Mr. Griffith served as advisor on national security and later national security minister, that introduced the National Operations Center, that introduced the Community Comfort Patrol, that introduced Joint Army Patrol, intensified Joint Army Police Patrol. Today we ask questions. What about these policies that worked? Why did you abandon that? Instead you're crying about the OPVs. Anybody remember OPVs? This current government cannot manage a little boat down Shakaramas to the Coast Guard. If OPVs were here, what would have been on OPV? They had no fuel, they had no manpower. You'd have been growing karaili vine and duck and chicken would have been hatching on a OPV because they cannot manage anything. So that we are asking to return to some of the successful policies of that era of the People's Partnership that worked. And I also want to say, because, Mr. Griffith himself will not be beating his own chest, but there was a concerted attack on Mr. Griffith last evening. Concerted attack. I think they fear him. I think the PNM is in mortal fear of a political role of Mr. Gary Griffith. And this is why there's this vile attack. But Mr. Griffith has a track record of performance, of success, even as Commissioner of Police recently, apart from National Security Minister, apart from advisor to a Prime Minister on National Security, in which we procured equipment for the Coast Guard and vessels and so on. We introduced several policy programs that worked. And during the People's Partnership, I want to remind you the time Mr. Griffith served this country, we had the lowest level of serious crimes, I believe, in 31 years. So there must be something about a man who served in a government, presided over the lowest level of serious crimes in 31 years, then became Commissioner of Police and had one of the lowest murder rate per year for any year in the history of this country, had one of the, post-1995, had one of the lowest murder rate, dealt in a strategic way with the criminal elements, and probably very important, we forget, Mr. Griffith was hands-on. He was accessible, he was on the ground. If there was a police operation somewhere, he would be there in the front. Not just providing, the face and the body and the inspiration, but also ensuring that he has a look at what is happening so that the police will perform. They will conduct whatever they have to conduct. So I would indicate that the government is in mortal fear of Gary Griffith, and as such, this may explain this type of vile attack that they launch time and time again on him. In ending, I will take questions later, of course, but I will remind the media and the national community that the Opposition United National Congress, our partner, the NTA, in coalition alliance with us, we have the personnel, we have the policy, we have the plan, we have the program, and in record time, we can return law and order to Trinidad and Tobago. I repeat that, in record time. Some will say 100 days, maybe a few months, but in record time, this country will be returned to law and order on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago with the United National Congress, the National Transformation Alliance, and all other partners that we will form a government with when that time comes, which we hope will be sooner rather than later. Thank you all very much for your attention. And now is, of course, my great pleasure to ask former Minister Gary Griffith to address us.
Thank you very much. Members of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, good afternoon. The country indeed had to endure Keith Rowley at his worst yesterday, twofold, as stated by Mr. Munilal at the post-cabinet media conference and then in Samoa. Getting crazy. In the post-cabinet conference, again, that's the reason why they call it a post-cabinet conference, and nothing is ever said about what happened in cabinet. It is used as an avenue to attack, to destroy, and to discredit anyone. He did the same at the Kwesi, where it is you had 176 viewers on PNM's live stream and about 50 odd persons at the meeting being directed to attend. And what was unfortunate, the country wanted to hear options. The country wanted to hear solutions. The country wants to know where we're going from here. The Prime Minister and his mini-me, Fitzgerald Hines, they spent all of their time in that meeting yesterday at the Kwesi, attacking, destroying, discrediting, saying the worst things you can say about people. It was disgusting, it was embarrassing, it was unfortunate. This is total disrespect to Trinidad and Tobago because everywhere in the world they're seeing what they are doing. It was so unfortunate to have a Minister of National Security boast that his greatest achievement was to see the back of Gary Griffith. This is a Minister of National Security where he is responsible. The two highest murder rates in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, back to back in 2 years. Nothing as it pertains to helping the country, and that is your great claim to fame. And again, what was unfortunate, well, again, it said a lot. Not one person in the audience applauded. But that is what they have done. What we are going to see with this government over the next year is not solutions. It is to go and to lie and to discredit and to disgrace themselves and the country, to say the nastiest things about people. I have no intention to go down that road. I am sure I can speak on behalf of the NT and I can speak on behalf of the UNC. I'm confident that we intend to find solutions. We intend to go in a different manner. Keith Rowley has gone now to the bottom of the barrel. He has gone to the gutter. He started last night by attacking someone who actually came there and told the person to shut up. That is how he is, full of hate, bitterness, and a man totally out of control. And his hatred is now getting the better of him. He is losing it. You're actually seeing the meltdown. So I want to get into facts. What the country wants to see, as I said, is solutions. The country wants to know Is it that you have the capability? Do you have the plans? Do you have the policies? Do you have the political will to do what is required to help Trinidad and Tobago? Not going on a platform every single time and attacking, destroying, and lying about your political opponents. It started with the state of emergency. So let me clarify with this thing about the state of emergency. That state of emergency in 2011, let me give you the facts because I was the National Security Advisor at the time. That state of emergency was called because of the advice given by the experts, by the law enforcement officials, those individuals involved in the intelligence agencies that said there was a clear and present danger, and they gave the advice to the chair of the National Security Council that if something is not done, it can be mayhem, mass murders, and assassination attempts. It was the right of any prime minister to have called the state of emergency. That is fact. It is fact that there were 254 murders just before that state of emergency was called in 2011. Had we continued on the same rate, it would have reached about 400 murders. It so happened that that year it reached about 352. So it is a fact. 48 lives were saved. 48 young men continued to live to see 2012. 48 families were able to state that I had my child and I did not lose my son. That is what that state of emergency did. Fact. If anyone has a problem with that, well, then you're evil and you really need Jesus. Fact. That the comments being made by his other mini-me, Stuart Young, that people were arrested willy-nilly, to educate those who are not educated in the PNM government. The government does not, or they do not go ahead and arrest people. Those actions took place because of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. If the hierarchy of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service did not do their job properly, you can't blame the government for it. And that is why in the same manner of the state of emergency that took place under my watch, there was not one incident of abuse of authority. There was not one incident of persons being arrested wrongfully. So to continue to speak that people were arrested, giving the impression to the country that government gave directives, that is not true. That is a lie. So again, if the hierarchy of the police service made a mistake, that is not any cause to say that the SOE was wrong and it should not have taken place. Fact. Keith Rowley should be the last to talk about the concerns about government trying to influence anyone. It was this government that tried to pressure me to arrest citizens during the last state of emergency, to recall that. So the hypocrisy of this government trying to speak about persons being arrested wrongfully in 2011, where that government never gave such instructions. In contrast, under my watch, the people will be aware of it throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I was being pressured, and that is where they had a conflict between the Prime Minister and myself, where it is they were trying to get me to arrest citizens in their homes because of the ignorance of the Prime Minister not understanding public health regulations meant that persons could only be arrested if they breach the regulations in public, not in their homes. But I was being pressured to arrest citizens in their homes. Had I done that, bow to pressure, there would have been hundreds of different lawsuits and the country would have paid the price. Fact again, what the Kamala Prasad Bissessa was stating is that because of the failure of this government over the last 8 years, it seems that there is no other alternative than to call a state of emergency for this government because of their failure, because of their inability to deal with the problem. This is in total contrast to what will happen when the government changes, because you would have seen the results by the previous administration when it was, as Mr. Mulilal stated, it was the highest reduction in serious crime in 31 years. And then under my last 18 months as Commissioner of Police, it was the highest reduction in violent crime in 17 years. So we know what to do. We have the plans, we have the policies, we have the solutions, we have the technology, and we have the political will to do what is required. So please let us get away from this perception and plan, which is what the government is trying, that when they are removed from office democratically, the new government will call a state of emergency. We would have no need to do so. It is probably needed now because of the incompetence of this government. And again, finally, as it pertains to the state of emergency, the comment made by the Prime Minister about the fact that substantive Commissioner of Police in 2011 did not know when the state of emergency was called, even though he was out of the country, he was on leave, and all power goes to the acting Commissioner of Police, who was the one that was fully briefed. In contrast, in the last state of emergency, I was the Commissioner of Police, and I was only being made aware of when an SOE was called, when the curfew will take place, when the curfew was lifted, by watching my goodly people in the media. I was never briefed. I was never given any advice. So I had to play catch up constantly because of the failure of this government. Keith Rowley, again, as I stated, continues to speak about looking after the well-being and the concerns of criminals over that of law-abiding citizens by continuing to state and remind the country that they are people too and they have rights. But what, Keith, what about the rights of the law-abiding citizens? You came and you made a statement that said that I stated that two persons being held by the police died because they fell off a chair. That is a lie. I never said anyone died because they fell off a chair. But it is interesting that you had a concern that these two persons died, and rightly so. But where is it that you commended the police, but at least these two individuals that would have been charged and responsible with reports of rape and kidnapping of over 70 women, that the police were able to make sure that they were never able to do it again by holding these individuals? I want to go on again about his false and misleading information as it pertained to the Anti-Terrorism Act, where it is he stated that I am trying to state that all criminals should be declared terrorists. That he said in the post-cabinet conference. That also is a lie. I never said that. What I stated is that gang members, persons who hold an automatic weapon that can fire 35 rounds in 3 seconds, someone that can kill 35 innocent citizens in 3 seconds should and could be deemed a terrorist. And if you look under the Terrorist Act, where there is no actual definition, but it states the Terrorist Act is an act that can cause loss of human life, prejudice to national security, and is intended to intimidate the public. What more do you want than that? To ascertain that if an individual who has an automatic weapon could fire 35 rounds in 3 seconds should not be deemed a terrorist. But again, he is concerned about the rights of these individuals. He wants to make sure that they can have bail probably. Because if this goes and it is enforced, this type of legislation would ensure that when someone is held with an automatic weapon that can kill 35 citizens in 3 seconds, that person, again, no bail, 25 years in prison. It will also ensure that the persons who are involved in aiding and abetting, in providing the logistic support, in providing the weapons for them, the financial support, that also would ensure that these persons can be deemed terrorists and 20 years in prison. He has a problem with that. Why is it that we continue to feel that this government continues to look after the rights and the well-being of criminals over that of law-abiding citizens? He then, again, we heard him yesterday, where he now tries to blame the opposition for the situation and crime whilst he's in government. But when he was in opposition just 8+ years ago, he said that when you're in government, they are the ones that's responsible. So he flip-flops constantly. He needs to show the degree of leadership. Shame on you, Keith. Shame on you. You have a police officer that was protecting you, that was guarding you, that was there to escort you. He is killed. And instead of going to see the family, the very next day you're on the golf course playing golf with no care or concern about whilst the family is mourning. And that is what we have seen constantly with this government. No sense of compassion. I can go on about the comments being made about firearms. They have all been lies. It has been totally, when you speak about the Stanley Jokey John report, after 3 years, not one person has been, not one firearm dealer, not one firearm holder, not one police officer has been arrested. And again, we can go on with the comments being made pertaining to criminals and deportees getting firearms. That was a lie. Every single thing that they have stated, I asked them to bring the evidence, show it. They did it constantly. 57 million rounds were given out. Issued. If 57 million rounds came in, why you as a government just approved $12 million to bring in more ammunition for the Defense Force and the police? What I was doing was making sure that there was bulk storage for the Defense Force and police in any situation. That is what happened in 1990. I was there because we were running short of ammunition in Camp Ogden, which again, it is so hilarious when Keith Rowley can refer to me as a wimp and a sissy. Gary Griffith was somebody who had 17 years service in the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. I was trained in the best military academy in the world throughout the United Kingdom and Cyprus. I came back home and I got medals. I was the youngest officer to serve this country, prepared to put my life on the line during the attempted coup. I was the first Trinidad and Tobago citizen soldier to return home with a United Nations peacekeeping medal. I have 12 years service, medal for meritorious service serving this country. There were 43 death threats on me as Commissioner of Police because I fought and pegged back the criminal elements. Fitzgerald Hines, his claim to fame is that he ran faster than Usain Bolt when the two men decided to kick water on him. And he wants to compare himself with me. When it is you have citizens watching and listening to a prime minister and a Minister of National Security doing nothing else but trying to say the nastiest things about persons. Know that your line is G-string. To Keith Rowley and Fitzgerald Hines, let me tell you all, I am happily married. So Fitzgerald Hines, whatever dark secrets you have in your head, I feel sorry for you. I've never seen you being escorted with a male or female. Whatever is your preference, that is your business. But just come with this kind of nonsense in front of people wanting to hear solutions, and that is you and your prime minister. That is what you all could come up with. It shows where we have gone as a country. I have asked the country to continue to look and monitor and see what is going on. The fact of the matter is that this government has become upset. They're upset that an SOE was called in 2011 that saved 48 lives. They are upset that I issued firearms that protected law-abiding citizens. They are upset that half of those firearms were issued for law enforcement officials to protect them so that when they go home, they can protect their families. They are upset that Kamala Prasad-Bissessar wants to amend the law so when criminals invade your home, you can protect yourself and not have to second guess. They are upset that I approved large amounts of ammunition for the Defense Force and the police service to ensure that they are properly prepared to defend this country, because we have a situation that is happening probably not right there with our neighbors, but especially right now internally with 3,000 gang members having assault weapons. They are upset for the recommendations that I have brought to use the Anti-Terrorism Act to target gangs and give them no bail, 25 years in prison, and possibly neutralize them. They are upset that I have recommended using the army to go after these individuals. The Defense Force have stayed in camp for only once they've come out in the last 30 years. I am providing the opportunity for them to come out. Instead, what Keith Rowley has done is speak about bringing $100 million, and what this is an avenue, as stated by Mr. Munilal, as an avenue to get it back into the hands of the same criminal elements. You cannot sleep with the devil. When you play with filthy animals, you will get fleas. This is what this government has done time and time again. I spoke to them as the Commissioner of Police. I saw the documents. You would have heard the comment by the Prime Minister when he said it is the right of gangs to apply for state contracts. That is coming to an end when this government changes. But what he is doing now is utilizing the Defense Force as a front to be able to pump $100 million and have it filtered into these gangs and call them community leaders. You are bringing members of the Defense Force instead of sending them into those hotspot areas to take the fight to these criminals, to neutralize them. You're going to ask the Defense Force to go into these hotspot areas to play twiddlywinks and all fours. So the article you saw on the front page of the Newsday is totally incorrect. It is not about taking the fight to the criminals and targeting them. This is about retirees, people 300 pounds, about 70, 80 years old, going inside there and using that as a front. There's something known as community policing, Keith Rowley. You are so clueless in understanding national security. That is a policing matter. That is known as secondary crime prevention. You do not understand that. So because of that, you are trying to use the Defense Force as an avenue to try to play around with these criminals rather than take the fight to them. And let me finally, I want to mention about the curfew passes. It again shows the ignorance of Fitzgerald Hines. He had a concern that 22,000 passes were issued for this country during curfew. It took me and the foresight I had and the police service to be able to implement this, because not one person in government had the foresight to understand that you can't shut down the country totally. You needed to have certain amount of people out there during curfew to keep the country running. It is unbelievable. I was able to keep that to less than 20 to 22,000, because we are speaking about members of the protective services, all the different persons in medical facilities, persons in all the different ministries, the public utilities. We have 50,000 security officers alone, the taxi drivers, the bakeries, the food industry, the fishermen, the other persons involved in the funeral homes, and so many different avenues. I was bombarded with over 100,000 requests. We put 20,000 odd persons to give them curfew passes to keep this country running. Had I not done this, the country would have been shut down. And you, Fitzgerald Hines, have an issue with this, because that has always been the PNM's game, to lie, to discredit. Similar, again, my final point about the OPVs. I asked the country, type BAE/corruption. BAE/corruption. You will find 17 countries that paid kickbacks to government officials under the BAE. They wanted us to buy the OPVs. It cost $2.4 billion. When I got the requests from Korea, Colombia, and Israel, we were getting the same OPVs for half the price. $1.2 billion. That shows exactly why they wanted the OPVs. And again, the OPV was there to secure your exclusive economic zone. That's from 12 to 200 miles out. It was never designed to secure our close borders. So all of the comments that you hear, and that is why we got the diamond vessels for half the price. But again, the PNM continues to speak about corruption. And when you look at the diamond vessels, this 8 years, it's still under investigation. The lies continue. They refuse to call names because they know it is a lie. That is why you have a prime minister that will have email gate, because you'll go in parliament, is the one place you can lie and not be sued. That is why he wanted to take this audit report into parliament. So it's not that I want to reveal the truth, but if it is so truthful, say it outside. Don't come in parliament to hide. Trinidad and Tobago, we intend to show you that we intend to find solutions. We are not going down to the gutter. This year is going to be a very rough year. You're going to be bombarded with lies, hatred, bitterness, anger, and you would have seen it by the Prime Minister and his mini-me, Fitzgerald Hines. We intend to give you solutions. We intend to give you hope. We intend to give you belief. We intend to show you that we have the ability, the plans, the policies, the technology, and the political will to make Trinidad and Tobago safe again and to make Trinidad and Tobago a better place. I thank you.
Thank you very much, former Commissioner Gary Griffith, for a very insightful and typically passionate analysis of the current situation that we face and some of the policy measures that have worked and some of the programs that need to be reintroduced to deal with this crisis that we face. And no better, example of really a deep and dark crisis could be found than on the front page of the newspaper today, with a sister weeping on the ground, bawling, "Tell me why." And this is, of course, linked to the killing of the police officer. I can also tell you that during this press conference, we got confirmation. Could you imagine, during a press conference dealing with crime, we got confirmation that, a horrible confirmation that a businessman died arising out of a home invasion last Friday evening in Arima. It is a story posted a few minutes ago. One Richard Ramkisoon, owner of Superstore of Arima, father of two, succumbed to injuries sustained following a home invasion on Friday evening. That is where we are as a society and as a country. And what is the Fitzgerald Hines focusing on? What is he focusing on? People under clothes and sissy. That is what he's concerned with, and mimicking and so on. This, Fitzgerald Hines, is a tragic joke, is a tragic comedy that this country is now burdened with. I wanted to remind you as well, ladies and gentlemen, that the United National Congress, our partner National Transformation Alliance, we are convinced that we will return law and order to Trinidad and Tobago. We are convinced of this. And could I ask now, we have members of the press in the opposition leader's office as well as online. If there are questions for either myself or former Commissioner Captain Gary Griffith, you can now field those questions.
Hi, good afternoon. Alicia Boucher from TV6 here. My question is to Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith, you mentioned a while ago that some of that 50 million plus rounds of ammunition, that they were to be used in terms of stocking for members of the defense force. Now, yesterday it was stated that ammunition that was banned by the UN and against government policy came into this country under your watch as police commissioner.
Yeah.
How do you respond to
Well,
that?
first thing, that's a lie. I challenge the government to show what government. There's no government policy. That was a lie. There's no such thing as government policy as it pertains to firearms. There's a law. So they lied to the country by claiming there was a government policy. The law states that if it is that you are eligible, you adhere to certain criteria, then you can have a firearm. So that was a total lie. And I challenge Fitzy Hines. Please show us where's that government policy. So there's no government policy. Two, as it pertains to the ammunition, I challenge them to show where 57 million rounds of ammunition came into this country. Three, the comment made that the UN has banned that is a lie. every single police service and almost every army and almost every police service in the world, they use 556 and 762. Total lie. I was in the military, and I'm telling you, that is a lie. 4, the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service still utilize this ammunition because I did a comprehensive audit as Commissioner of Police, and there's over 1 million rounds of such for the police service. So that was also a lie. 5, he continued to give the impression that well, maybe when we bring this ammunition, it meant that probably the criminals got it. On what grounds do you have that? What evidence? What names? Nothing at all. So you just make up something without any facts. And let me tell you, 6, if it is if it is so easy for criminals to get automatic weapons, you think they need to go by a legal firearm dealer who brought in legitimate ammunition to have to get it from them? If it's so easy to get an illegal weapon, you will get the illegal ammunition, you will get the ammunition outside as well. And again, if you recall, the ammunition that we've been seeing at crime scenes have been that of you're seeing markings of the Defense Force and the police service. They're forgetting all of that. So all of the nonsense that you've been told by them, they have continued to be lies. They are misleading the country. And again, it is indeed unfortunate, but because you're concerned about ammunition being provided, but then you provide $12 million this year to, guess what, to bring more ammunition for the police and the defense force. That's another 3 million rounds. So if it is that we had 57 million rounds already, why have $12 million approved to bring in more ammunition for the defense force? It was totally incorrect. And again, this is how the PNM operates. You say the same lies over and over and hope that the country will believe it.
So, Mr. Griffith, are you also denying that police officers were not checking in with these firearms dealers, as was claimed yesterday?
Again, we did a comprehensive audit. As the Commissioner of Police, it's the first time it ever happened. I did an audit going to every police station, being able to check for ammunition, being able to check for the weapons that would have been seized. We were doing that. If it is that Fitzgerald Hines understood technology, you cannot check ammunition through these the persons who have who are bought it in unless you use technology, which is why I got the FUL card with the chip. The FUL card with the chip would have ensured that there can be no corruption or ammunition being stolen, missed, or sold. Because if it is, in other words, somebody who has a range, he has 100,000 rounds of ammunition. You go in and you utilize 100 rounds, your card must go in. So when it is we come to those FUL dealers, we could see exactly where the rounds went. So you can't just say that it went and other people just used it. That was the technology. They shut it down. By you shutting it down, you have given the opportunity for the ammunition now to be misplaced. Why did you shut it down? Was there a deliberate attempt to ensure that criminal elements can very well get it? So the only way you could have that, because going to a range, somebody with a range, and they said, well, persons came in and they used 200,000 rounds of ammunition. You can't account for it. The card with the chip, that would have made sure that it was foolproof. They put an end to it.
And I think also said last evening was, as to how it was put, it sounded like a crime syndicate within the TTPS as it pertained to FULs, right? It was stated that handguns were going for something like $40,000, but even more shocking than that, assault weapons were going for $40,000 to $100,000. Mr. Griffith, your response to that?
Again, lies, because any citizen who has an automatic weapon would have broken the law, so that is impossible. Fitzgerald Hines also lied even a few months ago when he did an interview and said that we were allowing component parts to be brought in to change semi-automatic to automatic. That was a lie. And again, if it is that claims were being made that people were being bribed, I asked Keith Rowley, you made that comment, go to the police station and report it. And if it is that what you said is not true, the police should charge you for wasting police time. Because you can't be saying people are doing this, you're not giving names, you're not giving dates, you're not giving incidents when it took place. So you continue to say things in the hope that people will believe it. So you had the Stanley Jokey John report. After 3 years, you had an audit report as well. After 3 years, the Stanley Jokey John report and the audit report, not one senior police officer has been arrested, not one FUL holder has been arrested, not one FUL dealer has been arrested. So this was the massive well-oiled criminal industry. So you call it a massive well-oiled criminal industry, but you have not been able to find a crime. That is unbelievable. But this is what the PNM do. they say the same lies over and over and hope people will believe it. How something can be, if it is that people were being bribed, why doesn't Keith Rowley call a name and have that person go to a police station? I was the only commissioner of police ever that told the public if at any time anyone tries to bribe or blackmail you, if not the police, go to the PCA and report it. And that shows exactly what I intended to do, and it affected big business in the police service. I was able to cut over $100 million in overtime corruption because of a couple hundred police officers claiming they were working 24 hours a day, 30 days a month, and it was being signed. So obviously they will have rogue elements in the police service. I dealt with it, just like how I dealt with the concerns we've heard for decades about firearm corruption. But you can't find one thing that I have done incorrectly. The only thing you could blame me for, I did my job too well. Because commissioners before, there was a backlog, as they stated, of over 10,000 applicants. And because of laziness, they did not deal with it. I was dealing with it because my aspect was, if that is the law and someone has adhered to the criteria, then you are entitled to get a firearm. And that is what I did, and I did my job well.
And also, let me allow you to respond to another allegation that was, well, not an allegation, but, as it pertains to the bank account that you filed the injunction for, that the FIU is going to look into.
Yeah.
That was also stated yesterday. Minister Hines would have stated, well, if you have nothing to hide, then why not let
why so fast?
Yeah, that's it. Fast and out of place. Because if the FIU or anybody wants to get my accounts, you can have it. But you cannot break the law. You cannot abuse your authority as an independent body just to say willy-nilly, I am going to dig up into the accounts and I am going to call the banks. When you do that, you embarrass the reputation of the individual without any due process. The FIU, you must trigger a red flag. If the red flag wasn't triggered, it meant the FIU breached their authority. So if anybody wants to see my bank account, you could come and call me and you could get it immediately because I have nothing to hide. But do not break the law. Do not abuse your authority as an independent body to just state, well, I feel that I have a right to go and check into your accounts. That is my point. It is similar to a commissioner of police, which is what happened to me and my wife, where they decided to intercept our phones and use the word intelligence. That is a breach of confidentiality. You have breached my privacy. You have broken the law. And you can't say that I'm doing it because of intelligence. Because then the same way they could say, well, you're making phone calls. Why can't we intercept? You have nothing to hide? That is not the point. You as an independent body, whether you be the police service, the FIU, you cannot abuse your authority as an independent body. And that is what I am fighting. Because I'm fighting not just for Gary Griffith, but each and every citizen who might have the same problem by persons in independent bodies being probably politically manipulated to abuse their authority and to abuse the rights of citizens of this country.
And my final question on that $100 million initiative that was put forward yesterday. Now, the manner in which it was stated, it sounded as if the $100 million is to obviously give to defense force, retired and so on, to be able to go into these communities as you have gang members and so on, hindering the provision of state services. I think the lighting incident was mentioned where they wanted to put up lights, and this miscreant, as they call that person, said that they didn't want any lights and so on. So it sounded like it was to put that resource into the hands of the defense force to be able to go in and provide along with the state services, to provide state services to these underserved communities. Is it that you're saying that they should instead use community policing for that purpose?
If I could, Alicia, you seem to have a better clarity on that than Keith Rowley, because he did not state what you said in that way. But the issue really is, what are you doing with the money? Is it for security? But we're already paying a defense force and a Trinidad and Tobago police service for state security. There's also the issue of private security, which ordinary citizens, just to remind you, ordinary tax-paying citizens in this country take money, extra money from their pocket now to pay for security in their community. So we already have those levels of security. What are these retirees and recruits, I want to repeat, retirees and recruits coming to do? Are they coming to play dominoes, all fours, small goal, to mobilize the youth in the area? What are they doing? And I want to remind you, our government embarked on a study. It was the Selwyn Ryan study on youth at risk, in which over 100 recommendations were made to deal with youth at risk, particularly in hotspots, in underprivileged communities and so on. All you have to do is implement recommendations of that, many of which are low cost or probably no cost at all, using existing government services and existing government personnel. So we have a suspicion that this is really a program to transfer money to gangs in communities to buy and further embezzle and extort money from the state institutions. And that is something we look at. I also have a question, if I may answer. A reporter, I believe from the Newsday, has asked a question on something Dr. Rowley, I believe, said yesterday, which concerns the Damien vessels. Now, for several years, they have been talking about the procurement of those 12 vessels. While they are talking about the procurement of the vessels were down. 9 years later, they are saying, fix it. They are going to fix it. 9 years later, they want to fix what was done 9 years ago. And they have this mantra they keep. And this is an election year effectively. So you will hear this again. You will hear Live Sport and EMBDC and Damien Vessel that some foreign government received finder's fee for it of 100 million or something like that. If that is so, and if anything has been done that is criminal, that is wrong, if anything has been done that is illegal, they had 9 years to investigate. How come you give Vincent Nelson $100 million and a promise of $500 million because you wanted to fabricate a case against Anand Ramlogan and Gerard Ramdeen, but you could not investigate what you talk about, the procurement of Damien vessels? I believe it was now 10 years now or 12 years now. They cannot. So that, as the reporter is saying, is really, to me, a hogwash. The other issue somebody has just raised with me concerned the mobile scanners. Now, mobile scanners were procured when Mr. Griffith here was Commissioner of Police. There was actually a video of the police using it one night somewhere on the road, using it, and we saw it in action. As soon as Mr. Griffith goes, the mobile scanner is not working. Somebody pulled the plug.
Tire flat.
Tire flat. First they said tire flat. Then we say after 6 months, did you buy the tire? They said, well, we're fixing that, but we don't have personnel trained. But then how come the TTPS under Mr. Griffith was able to do an exhibition really of how it works and so on? So those persons were untrained. So they keep excuses why they can't have mobile scanners. Body cams. We are told now that you can videotape a policeman or woman in the line of their duty and so on. Let me just give you one example of how bad things are with the police. And I mean, somebody might tell me not to talk about that too. Do you know in a court case recently in Cuba in the magistrate court, this is a fact, as they say, check it out. The court prosecutor, which is police, had to give disclosure to the defense in a matter. So the defense, of course, they go to the magistrate in the open court and said the police has not made disclosure. The police court prosecutor asked the defense counsel, could you get a flash drive and give us? We don't have any flash drive and we don't have money to buy a flash drive. If you could give us the flash drive, we will give you the information because it's part of the process of disclosure. The police could not afford a flash drive. The magistrate, this is public record now, had to inform the court that there's no legal obligation on the part of defense to provide a flash drive. Meaning there are implications there that a case could fall apart because you have not disclosed. You understand the implication of that? That a case could fall apart because the police or the court prosecutor did not disclose because poor fella, he said the police can't afford to buy a flash drive. That is the reality in Trinidad and Tobago today. So I would answer that question on body cams, mobile scanners, and so on in that way. Any other question?
If I just want to add, and again to show the difference with them and us, you want to put $100 million to give to retirees in the defense force who are not trained in that type of community policing. What I had just prior to my departure, we were training 1,000 police officers, heavily trained in that aspect of community policing to be a big brother to 1,000 at-risk youths. And that would have been known as Crossroads. That would have taken 1,000 young men and women away from the streets or into crime by having a big brother of a police officer. And also as it pertained, as Mr. Munila spoke about with the vessels, when it is we got the Damien vessels are used similar in 17 other countries in the world. The Ostal we just got is used only in Australia. Let me tell you about Ostal. under the PNM administration, they acquired 6 hostile vessels in 2008 or 2009. And within 2 months, those 6 vessels broke down because they were not made for our waters. If anyone thinks I'm lying, go to Hartscott in Chaguaramas, you will see the 6 vessels there for the last 17, 16 odd years because they brought the wrong vessels. That is what the PNM government has when it comes to dealing with naval acquisition for the Coast Guard.
Any? Yes.
From Guardian Media here. One of the major counter-arguments the Prime Minister seemed to have last night in relation to the SOE is that he doesn't want to hinder any sort of economic recovery or slowdown of activities that could help boost the economy in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Any general thoughts or responses to
Well,
that?
Mr. Griffith is well equipped, but I would just say a businessman died because he was the victim of home invasion. I think that slows down some economic growth as well. Yeah.
And also, let me add, there's a perception, in some countries, a state of emergency is if there's a forest fire. We get this perception that a SOE is taboo, a SOE is the worst thing in the world because there's a curfew. Having a state of emergency doesn't necessarily mean you have a curfew. So the SOE triggers, allows the defense force to come in. As I said again, 5,000 highly trained persons. We have 500 in the Air Guard who are in Piarco Airport for the last 3 years doing nothing because they don't even have a paper plane. We have over 1,000 in Coast Guard and they have no vessels. And then we have 3,000 members in the defense, in the army on standby. We had 150 men coming down into Port of Spain to destroy Port of Spain when I was Commissioner of Police. They refused to come out and I had to utilize my tactics to ensure that Port of Spain was not destroyed. Thankfully, because the police, I had a trained unit that were militarized, known as the Special Operation Response Team, to save Port of Spain. So again, it shows where it is that we are going. And I hope this can put some degree of understanding to the point.
Sorry. Oh, I was just going to jump on his question because other than giving triggering a curfew and giving the army powers of arrest, in terms of utilizing that extra 3,000 members of the defense force that you say are present, can't it be done with the joint initiatives? I think the president just allowed, I think, was it 100?
No. So that thing with the president is real puppy show. That is something that is done every year for the last 20 years to ensure that volunteers you get 100, so they'll get paid for Christmas, they'll get a little thing, and then it allows 100 soldiers to come out to assist in what is known as joint patrols. The joint patrols is part of the IATF. That does nothing as it pertains to the strength and the power of the defense force. When I was Minister of National Security, I think a police officer was shot in Laventille. And I put the might of the defense force in Laventille. And for 123 days, there was one murder, and that was domestic violence. Laventille was never so safe. Jamaica, they do it right now. It is known as the Zone of Special Operations, where as specific areas that are targeted, that has become very volatile, it allows the defense force to move in there. Keith Rowley, they have refused to utilize the defense force and how it should be done. This is not about defense force coming in there high-handed, but these officers are trained not just in dealing with a war, but armed conflict. We have 2,000 persons with automatic weapons, hand grenades. We are at virtual war. The country is drowning in blood. And you have 5,000 remaining in camp, and now you're bringing out reserves to play twiddlywinks with persons in a community. That is not how you utilize the defense force.
Could I just add something that while the Prime Minister makes the point that a state of emergency would have some type of economic implications and so on, as it is today, many businesses are closing up. Many businessmen and women are migrating, whether it's Florida, Canada, wherever, are leaving, particularly now that technology allows them to do business cross-border. They are simply leaving. Many are closing up. Many are selling away. So already the high level of homicide, crime in home invasion and so on is leading to a migration of particularly the business community. And that will affect investment, job creation, income redistribution and so on. So there's already a huge economic implication of this level of crime. Anything else?
Yeah, and let me again add, this is to re-emphasize, the incoming government has no reason to call a state of emergency because you'd have seen what was done in 2013 to 2015 when we cracked it. You'd have seen what was done when I was Commissioner of Police. There was no need to call a state of emergency. So that will be the last resort, and it's always there. But because we had the capability, the tools, the political will, the technology, the units, the systems from the National Operations Center, the Special Operation Response Team, the Emergency Response Patrol, a proper 999 system, the Rapid Response Unit, the National Security Special Operation Group, the Community Comfort Patrol, I could go on and on. So we have, up to now, the things I have called, this government for 8 years have not come up with one policy to deal with national security, to deal with crime. So that would not even be on the cards when we get there. What we are saying is because of this present government's failure and incompetence, because of their inability to come up with any policies, state of emergency may very well be their last resort.
Mr. Griffith, last night the minister would have said a number of different things about you. I think at one point he even said, and perhaps jokingly so, that he wouldn't be surprised if he saw another pre-action protocol letter this morning. Just wanted to reach out to you and see if that's something you consider, if you reach out to your legal counsel, given everything that was said and expressed last night.
No, there's enough already, because I have Fitzgerald Hines in court, I have Stanley John in court, I have Rhoda Barrett in court, I have Keith Rowley's in court, I have several other people. So if it is that you feel that you're going to cross the threshold, remember the thing with defamation, if you're speaking the truth, you have nothing to worry about. What is Fitzgerald Hines worrying about? What is he concerned about? The fact when he said that I brought in change semi-automatic into automatic, that is a lie. He accused me of committing a criminal offense, and that is where I will take his rasta wicket.
One last thing, one last thing from myself. I know you and the goodly minister don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but during his wrap-up of his presentation last night, he made a comment where he basically called on all of society, specifically the judiciary, to sort of reassess or revisit how they look at crime and criminality, and he made a reference that possession of a protective wildlife species actually carries a heftier penalty than possession of a gun and ammunition. I know during your tenure as commissioner, you've also called for some stiffer penalties for people with possession of guns and so on. Is this something that you all kind of have some common ground on, or was it also?
No, not at all. I showed the value of the Anti-Terrorism Act. It is used right now in Ecuador. It is working. They have refused. The Anti-Terrorism Act is to make sure there's no get out of jail free card when we hold you with an automatic weapon. As a commissioner of police, we held an individual with 4 assault weapons. That means that if he had 4 friends, you could kill 100+ citizens in 3 seconds. And he got $50,000 bail the very next day because it is there. The anti-gang legislation, it has failed. It is not a good act. It is not pegging back the gang members. This one with the Anti-Terrorism Act, you utilize that, you turn them into terrorists. If someone could kill 35 people in 3 seconds and you have the capability and to do it, if that is not a terrorist, what is? But Keith Rowley seems so concerned about making these people deemed as terrorists. But they are the ones who have destroyed the country. They've destabilized the country. The country right now is drowning in blood. The country is mortally wounded. And you are saying that let us not go to that direction. So again, it shows that the views of the PNM is that they must always look after the rights of criminal elements more than the rights of law-abiding citizens. It is time the scale of justice must be tilted towards law-abiding citizens.
If I remember carefully, there was a piece of legislation initially that once you are found with a firearm, you get no bail. I think it was for 120 days. Was that underneath your tenure, Mr. Griffith, while you were commissioner?
No, I think that was when I was Minister of National Security, but it was a sunset clause.
Yeah, we have had the bail bill.
And the opposition refused to
we have had
allow for the extension of that piece of legislation. In hindsight, Mr. Munilal, do you think it was the right decision?
Well, when we refused, first again, let me make the point again. We supported 41 pieces of legislation to deal with crime. 41, including the bail. We have supported the bail bill before. When they came to extend, I believe on one occasion, 2017-18, I can't remember the exact year, they came and admitted that the Bail Amendment Act was not working, in that they could not identify one case where it was effected, where it was implemented. And on that basis, we said that if it is not working, then we have to discuss further amendments or further legislation. And I think in those circumstances, there was no support on that one occasion, but 41 times we supported the same PNM government on anti-crime legislation. I have one question here that I just want to take before we wrap up. Alicia, you have a lot to ask. I'm sure you and Mr. Griffith could have a long conversation in the corridor after. But one question is, as someone has asked, will the UNC participate in constitutional reform consultation? That was the question. Let me indicate that we are not at any consultation stage now. What I think they intend to do is to establish a committee to do some working paper or terms of reference or so on for consultation that may or may not take place next year or later this year. I'm not sure. In fact, I don't think they are sure of what they're doing. We keep to the point that this is a sham, this is a political ploy, because we are in an election season, general election, and nothing can happen given the issues involved and the time it will take. I also want to end this constitutional reform by saying that Mr. Rowley is bringing all of this committee to deal with constitutional reform. Many are very senior people incidentally, in that committee, retirees and so on. It's like the Defense Force retirees. They're bringing a lot of the retirees and so on. That is fine. They are very persons with expertise. But Mr. Rowley is doing that when he has already undermined almost every single independent public institution or constitutional institution. The Police Service Commission was undermined by Keith Rowley himself, who went, I think, like a policeman or a postman by the President's house and he snatched a letter that was meant to come to Parliament to appoint Mr. Griffith. He literally went there like a postman, snatched the letter. That is undermining a constitutional institution, Police Service Commission. They undermined the central bank. Remember, they threw out a governor of the central bank, and the court later ruled that that was unlawful. They undermined the Integrity Commission by starving them of funds to do their job, and just recently threw out the chairman of the Integrity Commission as well. If you look at it, the DPP has been crying blood for resources and equipment for years so that he may do his job, and his staff. They have undermined every independent institution under the Constitution and want you, the population, to believe now that they are serious about constitutional reform. That is a sham. We do not accept it at all. We do not accept it. And I will end that there. All that is left for me to do now is to thank Mr. Griffith for joining us this morning at the office of the Leader of the Opposition, to indicate to you the very good news that between only Facebook and YouTube, we have had in excess of 1,500 views, which is 1,450 more than the PNM meeting of last evening, I believe. So we want to thank all. I mean, it can't be 1,500 reporters, but we want to thank all for joining us. Clearly, there's great interest in what we are doing. That is excluding other social media platforms as well. I want to invite the national community to Monday night. We are having our Monday night forum in El Socorro on Monday coming, where we will hear from the political leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, Deputy Political Leader Jillian John, and other speakers. It will be a high-powered political meeting on Monday evening at 7 p.m. El Socorro in the constituency, I believe, of Barataria, Sawa. We look forward to that on Monday evening, and those of you, we invite you to join us online on the various social media platforms as well. So with those words, we thank you very much for participating in such a mass participation at our press conference this morning. Thank you, and God bless you all.